Invitation as a symbol of power. Imagine opening a delicate scroll, sealed in scarlet wax, with just your name written in looping, confident strokes. That alone has meaning. Someone powerful chose you. In ancient Rome, getting one of these invites wasn't a casual favor. It was a declaration. You belonged, or at least, you had a part to play. Let's be honest, that thrill would still be recognizable today. An exclusive party, a flashy gala, an invite-only concert. Our hearts still skip when the envelope arrives. But in Rome, this was theater before the show even started. You weren't just a guest. You were a cipher. Of course, reality hit as soon as you stepped out of your carriage or approached the villa's gates. You thought your toga looked sharp. Silk enough, ample color, maybe a tasteful brooch. You'd nailed casual elegance. Or so you thought. Instead, the threshold opened behind a servant who barely glanced at you. You felt oddly overdressed, like showing up to a black tie event in a sweater vest. You could feel the eyes, that tilted nod, the subtle sneer. Oh, isn't that precious? In that moment, you remember you're not here to be liked. You're here to perform. You swallow and try to mirror the measured ease around you, but the room drips with experience. Smoky elegance, velvet laughter, and a fearsome intimacy. You're aware of every thread of your attire, every bead of sweat, every syllable that might betray your uncertainty. Here's where modern commentary steps in. It's fascinating how human nature hasn't changed much. Invitees today at influencer dinners, VIP lounges, or film premieres still shift anxiously under the lights. It's the same script with updated lighting, but the subtle power imbalance remains. The invitation signals your value, but only in that hallowed moment when you arrive. And after that, the game resets. Back in the villa, the more you observe, the clearer it becomes. It's not friendship. It's not camaraderie. It's transaction. Every smile, every whispered greeting, every fleeting glance is currency. The senator feigning casual interest in your coat lining is calculating whether you're an asset or a loose thread. The poet next to him, too refined to speak loudly, but too self-aware to miss a subtle shift, knows exactly when to nod, when to look away, and when to talk about grain shortages as political metaphor. You realize that talk of wheat is never just about agriculture. You find the nearest reclining couch. It's not an accident that it was placed there. You sit, heart pounding, trying to adopt a posture that reads, "I'm cool, I know what I'm doing." Maybe. It looks effortless on everyone else. You're aware of how soft the cushion is, how perfectly your weight sinks into it, forcing intimacy with the furniture itself. Every detail in this room broadcasts control, and your response to it reveals who you are. There's no overt scandal. Yet. No perfumed dancer leans in. No trumpets. Just a hush, a slow pulse of intrigue. Behind the curtains, unseen but looming, are the real concurrences. Whispers, glances, shades of intention. Even now, you feel the tension of unspoken truths thickening the air. That's where I'll pause part 1. The next section moves deeper into the villa's rituals, the pouring of wine, the aromas, and your internal monologue as the rooms shift from polite to provocatively charged. Part 2. Stepping into the villa's theater. The gates don't creak open like something out of a ghost story. Instead, they part almost reluctantly, as if these walls have seen too much to bother with theatrics. You step across polished stone and immediately notice the fountain in the courtyard. Its gurgle is delicate, discreet, like someone humming under their breath, pretending not to hear the stories it has already absorbed. Inside, the air feels different. Not cooler exactly. Rome's heat doesn't yield so easily, but softer, perfumed with wine and roses, Shadows ripple across mosaics depicting scenes you might wish you hadn't noticed. Every tile is a reminder. This place isn't about subtlety. It's about immersion. In the distance, a lyre begins to play. Not loud, not triumphant, just soft enough to blur the edges of conversation. It's like background music at a modern cocktail bar. Pleasant, ignorable, but charged with intent. The melody doesn't soothe you. It primes you. Like foreplay for the ears, and yet their eyes miss nothing. When you glance up at one, the response is not warmth, but the faintest flicker that says, "We know more than you ever will." Imagine walking into a modern gala where the waitstaff not only serve you wine, but also silently note every handshake, every slip of gossip. The real power, perhaps, belongs not to the senators, but to those who know which senator stumbled after the third toast. You recline, awkwardly, on a low couch angled in such a way that your body is never quite comfortable. That's deliberate. Comfort dulls awareness. Discomfort sharpens it. These couches are traps, places where posture becomes performance, where every shift of your arm is read as confidence, timidity, or a signal you didn't know you were sending. In the distance, a lyre begins to play. Not loud, not triumphant, just soft enough to blur the edges of conversation. It's like background music at a modern cocktail bar. Pleasant, ignorable, but charged with intent. The melody doesn't soothe you. It primes you. Like foreplay for the ears. You sip your wine, carefully. Too quickly and you seem coarse. Too slowly and you look calculating. Even the act of drinking is judged. The same way today someone might side-eye how you hold a champagne flute at a networking event. Rome understood something we still live with. Etiquette isn't about comfort. It's about control. Around you, Rome's elite lean in their couches, as if sculpted by a hand that adored excess. Senators with too much power, poets with too many words, generals who hold both wine goblets and provinces with equal casualness. They don't appear scandalous, not yet, but their eyes betray anticipation. It's a waiting game, a hush before the curtain rises. And that's exactly what this villa is. A theater. Not in the sense of marble stages or scripted lines, but as a space where every person is an actor, every gesture a cue. Even silence has choreography. When someone laughs a fraction too loud, heads tilt like an audience awaiting the next act. When two people hold eye contact for just one beat too long, it's as if the room collectively inhales, waiting to see how the story unfolds. But you're not the only one who knows. Across the room, a priestess, who shouldn't even be here, meets your gaze with a sly curve of her lips. She knows the theater too. Everyone here does. The trick is whether you can play your role without becoming someone else's entertainment. And that's where the tension simmers. You are both spectator and performer, both guest and pawn. The stage is set, the orchestra hums, the audience breathes as one. You thought you came to a party. You've actually walked into a living play. What fascinates me most is the way atmosphere manipulates behavior. Modern clubs pump bass through your chest until your heart can't resist syncing with it. Michelin restaurants plate desserts like jewelry, forcing you to pause and admire before tasting. Political summits light their rooms just right, ensuring the cameras capture gravitas. Rome was doing all this millennia ago. They didn't need spotlights or subwoofers. They had torches, lyres, and human choreography. By now, you're alert to the truth. Nothing here is accidental. Not your placement near the wine table, not the faint brush of rose oil drifting past, not even the way the torches flicker in calculated rhythm. The villa is a machine designed to strip away your defenses and make you pliable. Part 3. Wine as the evening's true engine. If the villa was a stage, wine was the orchestra. Nothing moved until the cups were filled. Not politics, not poetry, not the whispered promises carried behind silk curtains. Wine was the evening's pulse, the lubricant of laughter, and the boundary between silence and confession. The servant who brings your cup knows more about you than you think. He dilutes the dark liquid with water, just enough to keep you upright. Roman wine wasn't meant to be swallowed straight. It was thick, fiery, enough to knock even a general flat. Dilution wasn't about politeness. It was survival. Without it, the night ended early, face down in a mosaic. With it, the night stretched, unraveled, blossomed into chaos at just the right tempo. Every cup was theater. You didn't just drink, you performed. A toast, a clever quip, a glance across the couch. The audience wasn't just the guest beside you. It was everyone. That's the unnerving part. Every sip you take becomes a line in the script. Too cautious and you look suspicious, as though guarding secrets. Too eager and you become comic relief, the senator who slurred Cicero into a fish joke. I can't help but think of how this ritual persists. A business dinner today rarely starts with the signing of papers. It begins with the first bottle uncorked. At weddings, speeches wobble not because the words are weak, but because the glasses are full. Even in nightclubs, the raised shot glass becomes a declaration. We're in this moment together. Rome understood this universal truth. Alcohol isn't about the drink. It's about the contract it writes between us. By the second cup, voices loosen. The general's booming laugh fills the hall, drowning out the lyre. The poet reclines deeper, daring himself to flirt more boldly with his metaphors. You too begin to sense your Latin flowing more smoothly, as though the wine oils the tongue itself. By the third, you laugh at jokes you don't quite understand, nodding sagely at stories involving Neptune, a goose, and a loophole in temple law. And that's when the real magic of wine unfolds. The line between truth and fiction dissolves. One man swears he once dined with Cleopatra's cousin's astrologer. Another insists the emperor himself asked his advice on love. Everyone nods as though this is gospel, but you can see the subtle math in their eyes, ranking each tale from possible to put down the goblet. What's fascinating is how the Romans weaponized this blur. Wine wasn't only about pleasure, it was strategy. With enough cups, men who would never confess in daylight spoke too freely. A senator might boast of alliances, a general might grumble about weak supply lines, a rival might let slip which family he planned to undercut next week. Every laugh became surveillance, every spill a possible headline in tomorrow's gossip. The host, of course, is conductor of this symphony. He doesn't need to shout. One confident remark, one raised eyebrow, and the tempo shifts. The music dips lower, the torches flare brighter, the room hushes. His words might be poetry. They might be innuendo older than the Republic. No matter. It's the cue everyone was waiting for. The official transition from cautious networking to unguarded indulgence. And so, as your cup is refilled yet again, you raise it, not just to quench thirst, but to prove you belong. To refuse would be to step outside the script, to mark yourself as alien in a room that thrives on sameness. And so you sip, smile, and laugh with the rest, knowing full well that this wine is the true engine of the evening. This moment fascinates me most because I've seen echoes of it in my own life. That precise second when a gathering tips. At first it's polite. How's work? What do you think of the new roads? And then someone says something reckless, something funny, something scandalous, and suddenly the air shifts. You're not in a meeting anymore. You're in a confessional dressed as a party. Wine in Rome wasn't just fermented grapes. It was psychological choreography. 1 cup to open the door, 2 to loosen the locks, 3 to scatter the keys into the fountain. By 4, you weren't just tipsy. You were pliable, part of the collective rhythm. You thought you were drinking freely. In truth, the wine was drinking you. Part 4. Food as symbol and spectacle. By now the wine has done its work. The torches seem warmer, the laughter freer, the lyre less like background and more like an undercurrent tugging at your mood. And then it arrives. The food. Or perhaps it's better to call it the performance masquerading as dinner. A silver tray draped in linen is carried past you. You lean forward expecting figs or olives. Instead, you find a carefully sculpted arrangement of fruit in the shape of body parts. A cluster of dates stuffed with tart fillings that burst in your mouth with something that feels less like taste and more like metaphor. Platters of oysters spiral across the table in patterns that make you glance away and blush, though no one else seems remotely bothered. This is Rome reminding you. Nothing is innocent here. Even bread loaves rise suggestively. Honey cakes arrive with sly geometry. And the centerpiece roast, was it boar, lamb, something else entirely, is decorated in ways that make you question whether you're supposed to eat it or interpret it. Across the room, a senator handles a sausage with ritualistic care, lifting it like a sacred relic before biting with a slow smile. You look away quickly, but not before catching the poet scribbling notes, probably to turn this scene into a scandalous verse by morning. Food, in this villa, isn't food. It's narrative. It's a message that wealth allows you not only to eat, but to sculpt meaning into your meal. The Romans knew that indulgence wasn't about filling the stomach. It was about making the stomach complicit in the theater of desire. As you nibble on a pastry molded into the likeness of Venus herself, you notice how quickly you stop asking questions. At first you wondered, why is this fig shaped like that? By the third course, you no longer care. You're absorbed, lulled into complicity. That's the point. Excess works not just by shocking you, but by exhausting your resistance. It's impossible not to compare this to our world. Think of haute cuisine restaurants where dessert arrives as a chocolate sphere that melts when sauce is poured over it. Think of the obsessive plating on Instagram, where people spend more time photographing a dish than tasting it. Think of wedding cakes stacked into improbable towers, covered in flowers no one eats. All of these echo Rome's truth. When food becomes performance, the real nourishment is prestige. But beneath the spectacle, something darker lurks. Every course is also a reminder of hierarchy. The wealthy can waste food in the name of art. The poor outside these villa walls might fight for crumbs of bread. The abundance here isn't innocent. It's a flex, the edible equivalent of marble statues. To eat extravagantly is to declare, we are untouchable. And then comes the ritualized intimacy of feeding. Across the room, a woman hand-feeds grapes to a reclining magistrate, one by one. He accepts each as if it were a sacred rite. She doesn't simply drop them into his mouth. She places them with a deliberation that makes the act feel half religious, half erotic. He chews slowly, praises the texture, and you're not sure if he means the grape or the moment. What strikes me most is how little has changed. In today's world, feeding another person, at a wedding, in a romantic dinner, on a reality TV show, still carries an intensity far beyond nutrition. To give someone food is to assert both intimacy and control. Rome exaggerated this truth into a system. Banquets became political stages, where grapes weren't just grapes but weapons of seduction. The host, of course, closes the scene with applause for the cook, who bows before retreating into shadows. The guests clap politely, not because they're grateful for the meal, but because they've just witnessed another act in the evening's play. You realize, as your tongue tingles from spiced almonds, that you haven't eaten dinner. You've swallowed a metaphor, digested a performance. Food in Rome was never simply nourishment. It was spectacle, symbolism, theater in edible form. And as the lyre shifts tempo, signaling the next act, you know this feast wasn't designed to fill you. It was designed to change you. The room doesn't laugh. The room exhales. You realize in that moment that the performance isn't entertainment. It's permission. By watching her, everyone else is allowed to slip a little further from restraint. Part 5. Entertainment as social catalyst. The first sign that dinner has ended isn't the empty platters. It's the music. The lyre, which had lingered politely in the background, sharpens its tempo. A few heads turn, laughter fades, and all eyes drift toward the makeshift stage. Though here, a stage is nothing more than a stretch of polished marble in front of a curtain. Then she appears, the dancer. Draped in silk so sheer it clings more than it covers, oiled skin gleaming under torchlight, every step a suggestion that gravity itself has grown shy. She doesn't bow or smile, she doesn't need to. Her body is the greeting. She moves in spirals, raising her arms like wings, then curling them like claws, as though embodying a myth no one dares name. At one point she mimics an eagle, and you wonder if it's allegory, parody, or just a drunken dare from the host. And here it comes, the mythological reenactment. Tonight's choice? The Rapture of Ganymede. You remember it vaguely from school. A mortal boy whisked away by Zeus. But this version features exaggerated moaning, 3 laurel wreaths placed very strategically, and a man wearing a horse mask for reasons you cannot possibly explain. The audience claps wildly. Even the flute player looks exhausted. Next comes the poet with his lute, crooning rhymes about Venus that stretch love into dove into above, each line more absurd than the last. Yet the guests roar with laughter, clapping as if it's genius. And in a way, it is. Not because of the words, but because of the timing. His verses grease the shift from seriousness to silliness, from calculation to chaos. Then a juggler enters. At first fruit, then knives, then something that probably violates Athenian law. The crowd gasps, not because they care if he succeeds, but because gasping together feels good. It binds them, fuses them, primes them for the real show that always follows. By the end of the final performance, the villa no longer feels like a dining hall. It feels like a carnival held indoors, with silk curtains instead of tents, and senators instead of jugglers. People lean closer, laugh louder, touch more freely. The polite boundaries of earlier conversation have melted into candlelight. You sip your wine, still pretending composure, but you know the night has tipped. Entertainment has done its work. The play is no longer on the marble stage. It's everywhere in the room. At this point, you understand the truth. The entertainment isn't filler between courses. It's the ignition switch. Each act strips away another layer of inhibition. Dancers set the body in motion. Musicians spark laughter. Reenactments dissolve the last semblance of respectability. I can't help but see modern parallels. Think of how a wedding band transforms stiff guests into reckless dancers. Think of how a halftime show unites tens of thousands in shouting, waving, forgetting decorum. Think of reality television, where watching strangers embarrass themselves gives viewers silent permission to indulge their own hidden chaos. Rome invented this template. The stage was never about distraction. It was about unleashing. Part 6. The Dance of Flirtation. There's a moment in the evening when the laughter changes. Earlier it was polite, polished chuckles, the kind you hear in Senate debates or marble courtyards. Now it's deeper, breathier, and edged with something unspoken. That's when you realize the dance has begun. Flirtation in Rome was not clumsy. No one shouted across the hall or stumbled with pickup lines. It was closer to strategy than seduction, an Olympic event in subtlety. A hand brushing silk, a glance held one heartbeat longer than polite, a compliment disguised as philosophy. Your strength reminds me of civic infrastructure, reliable, enduring, slightly intimidating. Everyone laughs, but everyone knows it isn't about aqueducts. And yet, no one rushes. The art lies in patience. The Romans treated flirtation like architecture. Layered, deliberate, carved with precision. Tension wasn't something to be broken quickly. It was something to be cultivated, held, savored, like aging wine in amphorae. You sit rigidly, trying to imitate ease, Across the room, a woman runs her fingers along a curtain in your direction, wordless yet unmistakable. You don't know the code, but a nearby poet nods as if you've just witnessed a sonnet written in fabric. Emboldened, you recline slightly to project confidence. Unfortunately, the cushion betrays you, sinking too low, leaving you sprawled in a pose best described as collapsed senator. Smooth. The man beside you chuckles, leans in and says, "Don't worry, I once fell into a brazier trying to impress a vestal." Comforting? Maybe. Concerning? Definitely. But the message is clear. Failure is forgivable, hesitation is not. Flirtation here is less about words than about rhythm. Conversations pivot from politics to innuendo without pause. Would you like more wine? Could mean, shall we vanish behind that curtain? A laugh that lingers one syllable too long becomes an invitation. A touch on a goblet turns into a promise. Flirtation here is not about getting answers. It's about asking questions no one says out loud. The pleasure lies in the uncertainty, the thrill of wondering what that glance, that smile, that fig offered at just the right moment might mean. And as you lean back into your treacherous couch, you realize you're no longer a guest watching. You're a piece on the board, moving with the rest. Modern parallels leap to mind. At corporate mixers, a shared glance across the room can signal more than a handshake ever could. At weddings, two strangers locking eyes during a toast may begin a story no one else notices. Even in digital spaces, a like, held back for just the right photo, becomes a coded gesture. Technology changes, but the language of suggestion doesn't. The thrill, of course, lies in ambiguity. No one says exactly what they mean. That's the point. You don't ask outright. You imply. You insinuate. You build a web of half-truths and veiled metaphors until the room vibrates with possibility. Someone whispers about plucking Jupiter's apple, and though you don't understand the reference, you nod wisely as if you do. By now, you're part of the rhythm, even if clumsily. You swirl your wine, meet a gaze across the room, and attempt your most mysterious smile. Do you know what you just agreed to? Absolutely not. But in Rome, that's not a problem. In fact, that's the game. Part 7. Behind the curtains. At first you think the curtains are decoration, a practical attempt to soften marble walls and torchlight. But the longer you sit, the more you notice their placement. They aren't random. They hang in archways, drift across columns, flutter where no breeze should reach. They don't divide rooms. They suggest possibilities. And soon enough, guests begin to drift. Not in a rush, not in embarrassment, but with the kind of casual confidence that comes from repetition. A glass of wine set down, a glance exchanged, a murmured, "Shall we?" followed by 2 or 3 figures disappearing into linen obscurity. You are approached eventually by someone with marble-carved confidence and a voice softened by 6 cups of wine. They gesture toward a nearby curtain, asking if you'd like to explore the finer points of Roman hospitality. Panic grips you. You blurt out something absurd about being here only for the dates. They arch an eyebrow, half amused, half dismissive, before vanishing with someone more fluent in metaphors. Relief and regret mingle in your chest like watered wine. Everyone pretends not to notice. That's part of the choreography. No one acknowledges what happens behind the curtains directly, but everyone notices who vanishes, with whom, and how long they're gone. It's unspoken but understood. The curtains are less about privacy than about plausibility. They give the party deniability, a veil thin enough to hide but porous enough to feed gossip. Some guests return flushed, glowing, as though they've debated philosophy with their whole bodies. Others stumble back, looking like they've wrestled a satyr. A few don't return at all, perhaps slipping away into Rome's night, or perhaps too embarrassed to rejoin the theater. And then there are those who emerge, calmer, quieter, whispering agreements that will echo in tomorrow's Senate debates. You lean back, choosing not to cross that linen threshold tonight. But you can't deny the power they hold over you. The sight of fabric swaying, the sound of muffled laughter, the mystery of absence. It's intoxicating. The curtains aren't just barriers. They're sirens, whispering, "What if?" And as sandals shuffle across mosaic floors, as another trio slips into shadow, you realize the villa's most dangerous stage isn't the one with the dancer or the poet. It's the one hidden behind silk, where Rome bears itself in ways that history only hints at. But here's the thing. The curtains aren't only about lust. They're about power. Deals are struck in whispers on silk cushions. Alliances sealed in gestures more intimate than handshakes. Behind those veils, Rome doesn't just indulge, it negotiates. Senators promise support, generals pledge troops, families trade favors. These aren't distractions from politics. They are politics, just stripped of marble podiums and replaced with torchlight. And isn't that still true today? Think of the VIP lounges at festivals where sponsorships are finalized, not on paper, but over champagne. Think of the after-parties at conferences, where handshakes in dim corners set the tone for entire industries. Even in modern governments, the real decisions often happen not in chambers, but in quiet dinners, smoke-filled rooms, or late-night calls off the record. Rome's curtains were simply the visible symbol of this eternal truth. What matters most is negotiated where the audience can't see. Part 8. Politics in the Bedroom. You thought these gatherings were about indulgence, wine, music, bodies in motion. But somewhere between the sixth toast and the third curtain shuffle, the truth emerges. This isn't chaos. It's strategy dressed in silk. Behind the curtains, voices soften. No orations, no public debates. Just murmurs. Of course I support your cousin's candidacy. Perhaps a few legions could be stationed closer to your estate. Yes, the renovation will pass the Senate vote. Consider it done. These aren't drunken whispers. They're transactions, slipped between kisses, framed by candlelight. Rome understood that a promise made in the heat of intimacy carried a weight speeches couldn't rival. What fascinates me is how reputation was both weapon and shield. To be seen with the right person, curtained or not, could alter your fate in the city. A misplaced laugh, a poorly timed compliment, a rumor born in the shadows could cling to you forever. One man jokes about olive oil taxes, and by morning half the forum believes he's planning a coup. Another tells a clever story about Cicero and grapes, and suddenly she's invited into every influential household in Rome. On the main floor it's the same. A senator leans too close to a merchant's wife. A general compliments a magistrate's laugh with suspicious enthusiasm. Even here, surrounded by clapping, reclining, and feigned innocence, you can sense the negotiations humming beneath the noise. Every laugh disguises an alliance. Every hand brushing another conceals a bargain. It's striking how familiar this feels. Modern politics pretends to be above such theatrics, yet history proves otherwise. Kings built empires on mistresses' whispers. Queens brokered treaties in boudoirs. Even today, scandals erupt when pillow talk reveals secrets never meant for daylight. Human intimacy has always been more persuasive than parchment. Rome simply acknowledged it openly. You realize now that survival here isn't about indulging the party. It's about reading the room, catching the subtext, aligning with the right curtain at the right time. To remain neutral is impossible. To be careless is fatal. The villa is not just a feast. It's a battlefield, fought with laughter, figs, and silk. And as you raise your cup again, you begin to understand. The true intoxication of the evening isn't the wine or the music. It's power. negotiated in whispers no historian will ever record, but whose ripples will shape the city outside these walls. You catch snatches of these negotiations as you sip your wine, trying to look invisible. A woman draped in jewelry, speaking as if idly, asks a visiting general to shift troops nearer her family's land. He smiles, agrees, and you know the agreement is sealed. Not by Senate decree, but by the weight of her gaze. The irony is sharp. Rome prided itself on laws, forums, orators, and civic order. Yet here, in a villa lit by oil lamps and perfumed smoke, its future is decided in whispers and caresses. The Republic debates in daylight. The Empire is born in the dark. And isn't this still the case? Decisions that shape nations are rarely made where cameras roll. They're forged over dinners, drinks, and private moments we'll never see. The Roman villa was simply more honest about it. Curtains instead of conference rooms. Wine goblets instead of pens. Part 9. Morning after. Reputation. Before. The villa that last night pulsed with laughter and torchlight now lies heavy with silence. You wake on a cushion that is definitely not yours, the marble floor still cool against your skin. A mosaic of Bacchus grinning down at you with mockery. A servant offers honey cakes and watered wine, damage control disguised as breakfast. You eat without appetite, the sweetness cloying, the wine tasting like regret. Around you, senators and poets, generals and courtesans begin to reassemble themselves. Tunics are smoothed, togas re-wrapped, dignity tugged back into place like an ill-fitting cloak. No one speaks of what happened. That would be vulgar. Instead, conversation returns to neutral banalities. Lovely breeze last night. Did you try the quail? Everyone smiles as though the night were merely dinner with a touch of music. Your mind races. Did you say the wrong thing? Did you laugh too loudly at the wrong senator's joke? Did anyone notice your clumsy fall into the cushions? In Rome, these details aren't forgotten. They are weaponized. Every glance, every spilled goblet, every poorly timed smile becomes part of your reputation. And reputation here is everything. But you know better. The true feast continues, not in food, but in gossip. A man leaves, wearing another man's sandals. A woman slips away with a senator's scroll tucked discreetly into her sash. A magistrate departs looking 10 years older than when he arrived. None of this will be spoken aloud. All of it will be whispered by noon. You step into the daylight, blinking, the city suddenly too bright, too loud. And already the rumors spread like wildfire across the forum. Did you hear? Senator Publius left with a woman they're calling the Panther. I heard the host secured a new shipping contract during dessert. Someone claims a juggler set fire to a laurel wreath. Truth doesn't matter. What matters is the story, and whether you feature in it. You gather your things, a bruised plum, a scroll you don't remember taking, perhaps a rumor clinging to your name like perfume, and step out into the streets. The sun stings your eyes, but the real sting is knowing that half the city already carries a version of you that may or may not resemble the truth. That's the paradox of the Roman villa. The wine fades, the torches die, the silks are folded away. But the stories linger, fermenting overnight, retold with embellishment, until they are less memory than myth. You realize you didn't just attend a party. You became part of a legend. And legends have sharp teeth. But not all gossip wounds. Some elevates. A witty toast delivered at the right moment might secure you an invitation to another villa next week. A clever compliment about the host's peacock might transform into political favor. Word travels quickly. So does status. The morning haze becomes the arena of reputation management, where survival depends not on what happened, but on how it's remembered. And isn't that still our reality? Today it's not mosaics, but social media. A party isn't just lived, it's documented, reframed, retold. One blurry photo, one tweet, one whispered story at the office can shift an entire reputation. Half of it is exaggeration, the other half invention, but the echo is what sticks. Rome simply operated on scrolls and gossip instead of feeds and hashtags. Part 10. Rome's legacy of excess and order. Weeks later, you walk through the forum and catch the whisper of your own legend. Someone calls you the guest who quoted Horace while juggling grapes, though you only dropped one. Another insists they saw a senator riding a peacock. None of it is entirely true. None of it is entirely false. That is how Roman parties live on, not as history, but as myth, embroidered in every retelling. You wonder if scandal ever truly ended them. Of course, moralists railed against decline, publishing scrolls about toga-clad depravity. Emperors threatened to outlaw immoral assemblies, only to host their own debauched feasts days later. The cycle never broke because the truth was undeniable. These parties weren't distractions from Rome. They were Rome. But perhaps that is the genius of Rome. It understood that humans are never just rational, or just indulgent. We are both. Politics thrives, not only in marble halls, but in laughter over wine. Alliances form not just in battle, but in the heat of candlelit whispers. Order and excess are not enemies. They are partners, weaving the fabric of civilization. Every curtain, every goblet, every fig sculpted into metaphor reflected the empire's nature, its hunger for order, its seduction by chaos, its constant dance between virtue and indulgence. The villa was more than a playground. It was a mirror, showing Rome what it was, disciplined yet decadent, pious yet shameless, powerful yet fragile. And remarkably, from all that chaos came infrastructure that still shapes us. Aqueducts that defied gravity, laws that guided nations, philosophies still quoted today. How strange to think that roads were paved by men who once toasted figs like sacred relics, that political reforms were whispered in the same breath as flirtations behind silk curtains. Even now, echoes remain. Our conferences end with cocktail hours. Our boardrooms are followed by dinners where real deals are struck. Our weddings, our galas, our festivals blur the line between celebration and strategy. We tell ourselves we are different, more civilized, more restrained. Yet scroll through social feeds after any high-profile event, and you'll see it. The spectacle, the whispers, the reputations recalibrated overnight. Rome still lingers in us. As you sip watered wine on an ordinary day, the villa now behind you, you realize you've learned something vital. These parties were not only indulgence or political traps. They were human truth, crystallized. Our endless need to mix pleasure with ambition, intimacy with influence, myth with memory. You smile, adjusting your toga at last without fumbling. You've survived, not just the wine, the flirtation, or the food shaped into metaphors, but the understanding that in Rome, the curtain never truly closes. The theater of life continues, whether in a villa 2,000 years ago or in our own candlelit rooms today.